Hi guys, thanks for joining me for day 4 of my 12 Days of Christmas series. I'm going to be making a card with these cute little penguins from Clearly Besotted. They're from the Arctic Animals stamp set. I'm going to use the penguin and some of the little toppers to sit on top for some hats and antlers. So I've got some 6x6 pattern paper and I'm just going to cut that using the largest of the stitch rectangle dies from Simon Says Stamp. And then I'm also going to cut the largest of the ovals from the stitched oval stamp die set from Simon Says Stamp. This is going to create a window on the front of my card where I'm going to have the penguins sat inside, and I'm going to keep that section for another card. I don't need to throw that out, I'll use that on another card. So I've got some Tim Holts watercolour paper here that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so it's slightly bigger than the stitched piece that we've just cut. And I'm going to tape that down and create a mask, again using that stitched oval die and a hillside border from Simon Says Stamp. Now I could have just freehand cut a nice slope to make the hill for the snow, but I was feeling like using the dies. I had the dies out and I was doing some die cutting, so I went ahead and used my dies to create that mask with some Simon Says Stamp masking paper. So I'm just bringing in that piece to position exactly where I want my mask in the bottom section of the oval. And I had some difficulty with this card. You'll see there's a couple mistakes along the way. So I think the sentiment that I used, the chillax, it's the holidays, is perfect. I think people can get a little bit stressed out sometimes around Christmas, and card making is definitely not something that should stress you out. It should be fun. So I'm going to do some ink smushing. I think that's what I'm going to call it. I've just spritzed some ink that was placed down on my craft mat, and I've got this piece of acetate inside of some packaging. So I've got a really slick surface that's nice and sturdy, but it's clear so I can see through and I can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to pick up some of that ink and then smush it down onto the cardstock. So this creates a really nice kind of irregular watercolour pattern. You could use an ink blending tool, or you could maybe kind of get some paint or some ink onto a paintbrush and then just flick it onto the card base. But I wanted to try this ink smushing, and yeah, I really like how it turned out. So I was just using my heat tool to dry that in between each colour because I didn't want them to blend too much. And then I'm going to come in with a second colour. The first colour that I used there was the tumbled glass, and now I've got, I think that was peacock feathers that I've just used there. I've just rewind the video to double check. It wasn't peacock feathers, it was the Salty Ocean Tim Holts Distress ink. So I'm just doing the exact same thing. I'm just picking up some of that ink with the acetate and just smushing that down. So I really like this. I probably should have stopped after just these two colours, but to be perfectly honest with you, I hadn't tried this technique before, and I was really enjoying kind of playing with the different splatters and dots, and I ended up covering up too much of my background. So you'll see that in just a minute. I think it looks really nice just as it is here, but yeah, I definitely, I like the last colour that I added. I'm just not too sure it needed the last colour. So I wanted to use one of the newer inks by Tim Holts. So this one is the Blueprint Sketch ink, which was the July colour. So I've got the smaller cubes for the newer inks. To be perfectly honest, just because the storage that I have for my distress inks is designed to hold the full collection until they started bringing out the new colours, so I had to find a new way to store those. So I got the smaller inks, and I've got a one of the tins to store them in. Anyway, I decided to add some sparkle to the card by using some Perfect Pearls powder and a mini mister bottle. So I'm just mixed some Perfect Pearls with water and spritzed that over the top and left it to dry. So now moving on to the stamping, I'm using Ranger Archival ink because we will be using some watercolour on these little teeny tiny penguins, and I'm just going to stamp those down using my Misty. I really like the Misty. I think a lot of you will have already seen many videos showing just how great it is, so I'm not going to talk too much about that, but it definitely is worth the investment. So I stamped a couple of those hats and the igloo. And then I'm going to put down some masks. So I stamped these on some Simon Says Stamp masking paper and cut them out, and I'm just placing those over the top of the hat, so when I stamp the penguins onto them and peel the mask off, it looks like the penguins are wearing the hats rather than just having some weird kind of penguin headline running through those hats there. Okay, so that should make sense now as I peel those off. And I'm going to bring in my Inktense watercolour pencils to do some watercolouring. So in just a second I'll speed you up so you don't get too bored watching me colour, but essentially I'm just laying down some of that watercolour pencil and then coming in with my water brush and just wetting that and spreading the ink around. Now if you don't have a water brush, you can use a paintbrush and some water and you get the exact same effect. So I just worked with this and built up the colour. I wanted one of these penguins to have a little bit more definition above his nose, so he looked a little bit different to the other two. And I realised that as I'm going to fussy cut these images out, I didn't need to worry so much about going outside the edges, so I just made a big mess with the colouring, as I knew that I was going to be cutting right along that stamped line when I was finished. These Inktense pencils are really great. The pigment in the colour spreads really well when you lay it down, and you can get a really transparent colour just by adding a lot of water to a small amount of that pencil. Okay, so now I'm just peeling off the masking from the area that we ink smushed earlier on. You can see just a little bit in the video there that the Perfect Pearls powder has left behind a really nice kind of shimmer on that cardstock. And I think that looks really nice in real life. If you haven't tried that yet and you have Perfect Pearls, I think it's a really nice way to make the Perfect Pearls powder do more than what it's designed for. So when I peeled off the snow mask that I've got here, I realised that some of the watercolouring had seeped underneath that, but that's okay. I just took a white Jelly Roll marker and just coloured right over that, so I had a nice crisp snowbank again. Some of those areas are going to be covered up when the when the penguins are placed down, but you can't tell anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and fussy cut out each of those images, and I realised round about this point that my igloo was just kind of sat in the sky. I forgot to mask off a section for the igloo to sit on, so yeah, it just kind of looks like it's floating. It almost looks like a I don't know, some kind of UFO in the background. But I'll fix that a little bit later on again with my gel pen. Like I said, I didn't want to worry too much about this card. I think Christmas is stressful enough without being stressed over card making. So I die cut some craft foam, and I'm just placing some glue onto the back of this to pop up the front panel. So I wanted it to look like it framed the penguin image with some dimension around the frame, and I found that the best way to do that is by using some craft foam. You could also use foam dots or 3D foam tape, but the craft foam die cuts really easily and it adds a nice amount of dimension to the back. So I'm just making sure that that's perfectly aligned and in place, and then I'll go ahead and apply some more wet glue to the back of the craft foam. And then I'll centre that up on top of the panel that I've created and hold that down in place. You can also use double-sided sticky tape to hold your craft foam in place, and you can get craft foam that is already self-adhesive, but I've not tried that yet to see how that die cuts. So I'm going to stamp my Chillax It's the Holidays, which, as I say, feels like the perfect sentiment for this card. And I'm going to stamp that down using some black ink, and I'm using the Misty again because of the dimension of the card. I wanted to make sure that I got a nice impression, and if not, I could just go ahead and stamp that again. So using some glue, I placed down the igloo, and I just held that in place with a block just to apply some even pressure over that while it dries. And then I moved across to my penguin in the middle, and I didn't hold him down properly because I knew I wanted to tuck each of the other penguins either side of him. So now I don't know about you, but when I see these three penguins all lined up together, it kind of reminds me of the penguins from the Madagascar movie, and that one in the middle particularly looks kind of suspicious and like you might be up to something. And yeah, that's kind of been making me laugh every time that I look at this card. So I just wanted to create a small shadow underneath the penguins, and I used the TB1 Spectrum Noir alcohol ink marker. And that was a little bit too blue, but again I wasn't going to worry about it, so I just brought in the colourless ink blender and I just blended that out. The ink blender acts as it's almost like an eraser. It kind of bleaches out some of that colour, so I just use that over the top to kind of dull down the blue effect of that shadow underneath. Okay, so now I wanted to add some sparkle to my card base. I'm using some Simon Says stamp cardstock that I've cut down to form a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 note card. And I'm just using some more of that Perfect Pearls mixed with water in a mini mister to create some sparkle around the outside edge of this cardstock. I'm just going to go ahead and dry that with my heat tool, and then I can add the front panel onto the front. So once I've got that held down in place, I decided the card wasn't quite finished yet. I wanted to add just a little something extra to this, so I went ahead and got some of my Pretty Pink Posh clear, sparkling clear sequins in 3 different sizes, and I was using some multimedia matte just to add a few of those to the front of the card. This adhesive is really great for when you're using sequins, as if any of the adhesive squeezes out the side, it dries matte so you can't see it on the front of your card. I'm also using a fine tip applicator that I've applied to the front of that bottle, which makes it really easy to put down small amounts of adhesive. I think the sparkling clear sequins are a really nice touch to any card, and with them being clear, they kind of match with any design that you have. So here I'm just adding in some dots onto the card and cleaning up any of the white areas, as well as adding that extra snowbank for the igloo. So it looks a little bit less like a UFO now. So there we go, there's nothing in a card that you can't fix with a white gel pen. So thank you for joining me, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please do hit like or leave a comment below, and I hope to see you again on Sunday.